Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. Susanna sat cross-legged on the plush sofa, her fingers absently tracing the patterns on a throw pillow. The gentle hum of the air conditioning provided a soothing backdrop to her thoughts. "You've been awful quiet today, Sus," Kelly remarked, plopping down next to her friend. "Everything all right?" Susanna's gaze remained fixed on the pillow. "Just thinking about," a deep sigh escaped Susanna's lips. "The counseling session yesterday. It brought up a lot of stuff I thought I'd dealt with." Kelly reached out, gently squeezing Susanna's arm. "Want to talk about it?" Susanna hesitated, her brow furrowing. "It's just, Dr. Patel asked me why I was hesitating to complete the transition, and I realized, I don't know." "That's okay, Kelly reassured her. "It's a big decision. There's no rush." "But that's just it," Susanna replied, frustration creeping into her voice. "I've wanted this for so long. Why am I suddenly scared?" The front door clicked open and Shonali bustled in, arms laden with grocery bags. "Oi, a little help here!" Kelly jumped up to assist, leaving Susanna lost in thought. As her friends unpacked the groceries, their chatter faded into background noise. "Earth to Susanna!" Shonali's voice cut through her reverie. "You joining us for dinner or what?" Susanna blinked, realizing she'd been staring at the same spot for who knows how long. "Sorry, yeah, of course." As they prepared the meal together, chopping vegetables and stirring sauces, Susanna's mind kept drifting back to her counseling session. "Dr. Patel thinks I might be holding on to something from my past," she blurted out, interrupting a conversation about exam schedules. Kelly and Shonali exchanged glances. "Like what?" Shonali asked gently. Susanna shrugged, focusing intently on the carrots she was dicing. "That's the thing, I'm not sure. She suggested I might be, I don't know, mourning my old self or something." "That makes sense," Kelly mused. "I mean, you've been through a lot of changes. It's natural to feel a bit of loss, even if it's what you want." "But I don't want to be Steve anymore," Susanna insisted, her knife coming down with more force than necessary. "I never did." "It's not about wanting to go back," Shonali said softly. "It's about acknowledging what was and letting it go." Susanna's movement slowed, her eyes growing distant. Maybe it's not about Steve at all. Maybe it's about them." The kitchen fell silent, save for the gentle bubbling of the pot on the stove. Kelly and Shonali didn't need to ask who them was. "Your family," Kelly whispered. Susanna nodded, tears welling in her eyes. They never knew about any of this, and now they never will. Shonali moved closer, wrapping an arm around Susanna's shoulders. "Oh, hun, I'm so sorry." "I keep thinking," Susanna continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "What would they think? Would they understand? Would they still love me?" "Of course they would," Kelly said fiercely. "They're your family." Susanna shook her head. "You don't know that. You didn't know them." "No," Shonali agreed. "But we know you. And anyone who truly knew you would see how much happier you are now, how much more you." Susanna leaned into Shonali's embrace, letting the tears fall freely. I wish I could have told them. I wish they could see me now." "They can," Kelly said softly. "Maybe not in the way we'd like, but they're watching over you, Sus. And I bet they're so proud of how brave you've been." The three friends stood in silence for a moment, the only sound the quiet sniffles from Susanna. Finally, she straightened up, wiping her eyes. "God, look at me," she said with a watery chuckle, blubbering all over the vegetables. "Adds flavor," Shonali quipped, earning a playful swat from Susanna. As they returned to cooking, the conversation flowed more freely. Susanna found herself opening up about memories of her family, the good, the bad, and the complicated. "Dad was always so traditional," she mused as they sat down to eat. "I can't imagine how he'd react to all this." "Maybe he'd surprise you," Kelly suggested. People can change, especially when it comes to their kids. Susanna nodded thoughtfully. Maybe. Mom would have been easier, I think. She always said she just wanted us to be happy. And your sister, Shonali prompted gently. A sad smile played on Susanna's lips. She'd probably be upset I didn't tell her sooner. We shared everything. As the evening wore on, Susanna found herself feeling lighter. Talking about her family, sharing memories with her friends. It was like lifting a weight she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. I think, she said as they cleared the dishes, I need to do something. To remember them, but also to, I don't know, say goodbye? Kelly nodded encouragingly. That sounds like a great idea. What were you thinking? Susanna chewed her lip thoughtfully. I'm not sure yet, but something to honor them and also celebrate who I am now, who I'm becoming. We'll help, Shonali said firmly. Whatever you need. The next few days were a whirlwind of planning and preparation. Susanna threw herself into researching ideas, bouncing thoughts off her friends and Dr. Patel during their sessions. Finally, on a crisp Saturday morning, the three friends found themselves in a quiet corner of a local park. Susanna clutched a small box to her chest, her eyes scanning the area nervously. You sure about this spot? Kelly asked, adjusting the blanket she'd spread on the grass. Susanna nodded. It's perfect. Mom always loved picnics in the park. They settled onto the blanket, and Susanna took a deep breath before opening the box. Inside were a collection of items. Old family photos, her father's favorite tie, a friendship bracelet her sister had made, her mother's recipe card for chocolate chip cookies. I wrote something, Susanna said softly, pulling out a folded piece of paper. If that's okay. Of course, Shonali reassured her. We're here to listen. Susanna unfolded the paper with trembling hands and began to read. Dear Mom, Dad, and Emma, I wish more than anything that you could be here today. That I could sit down with you and explain everything that's happened, everything I've become. I know it might be hard to understand, but I hope you'd try. I'm not the person you knew. In many ways, I never was. But I'm finally becoming the person I was always meant to be. I'm happier now, more comfortable in my own skin than I ever thought possible. I miss you every day. I wish I could share this journey with you, hear your thoughts, feel your hugs. But even though you're gone, you're still with me. In my memories, in the lessons you taught me, in the love you gave me. I hope wherever you are, you can see me. And I hope you're proud. Not just of who I've become, but of the strength it took to get here. Strength you gave me, I love you, always. Susanna's voice cracked on the last words, tears streaming down her face. Kelly and Shonali moved closer, enveloping her in a group hug. That was beautiful, Kelly murmured. Susanna nodded, unable to speak for a moment. When she finally found her voice, it was thick with emotion. I want to bury these things. Not to forget, but to, I don't know, plant them like seeds so something new can grow. Her friends nodded in understanding. Together, they dug a small hole beneath a nearby tree. One by one, Susanna placed the items from the box into the earth, whispering a memory or a goodbye with each one. As they covered the impromptu time capsule, Susanna felt a sense of peace wash over her. It wasn't closure, exactly. She knew she'd always miss her family. But it felt like a step forward, a way of honoring her past while embracing her future. The three friends sat in companionable silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Shonali spoke up. So what now? Susanna took a deep breath, looking out over the park. Now, I think I'm ready to take the next steps. Kelly squeezed her hand. You sure? Susanna nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. Yeah, I am. It's time. As they packed up their things and headed home, Susanna felt a newfound sense of purpose. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she knew she had the strength to face it. And more importantly, she had friends who would be by her side every step of the way. The following week, Susanna found herself back in Dr. Patel's office, her leg bouncing nervously as she waited for the counselor to finish reviewing her notes. "So," Dr. Patel said, looking up with a warm smile, "you've made a decision?" Susanna nodded, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I have. I want to move forward with the full transition." Dr. Patel leaned back in her chair, studying Susanna's face. "And you're certain this is what you want? No more doubts?" "I'll always have doubts," Susanna admitted. "But I'm not letting them hold me back anymore. This is who I am, who I've always been. It's time to make it official." "I'm glad to hear that," Dr. Patel said. "And I'm proud of the work you've done to get to this point. It's not an easy journey." Susanna allowed herself a small smile. "No, it's not, but it's worth it." They spent the rest of the session discussing the practical steps ahead, scheduling surgeries, adjusting hormone treatments, legal name changes. By the time Susanna left the office, her head was spinning with information, but her heart felt light. As she walked home, she found herself noticing little details she'd overlooked before. The way the sunlight dappled through the leaves, the cheerful greeting of a neighbor walking their dog, the sweet scent of flowers from a nearby garden. It was as if making the decision had sharpened her senses, making her more aware of the world around her. Entering the flat, she found Kelly sprawled on the couch, textbooks scattered around her. "How'd it go?" Kelly asked, looking up from her notes. Susanna couldn't contain her grin. "It's happening. We're moving forward." Kelly let out a whoop of joy, leaping up to envelop Susanna in a hug. "I'm so happy for you." "Thanks," Susanna laughed, returning the embrace. "I couldn't have done it without you and Shonali." "Speaking of," Kelly said, pulling back, "we should celebrate. Where is that girl anyway?" As if on cue, the front door burst open, and Shonali stumbled in, arms laden with shopping bags. "You would not believe the sale I just found," she announced, kicking the door shut behind her. Then, noticing the atmosphere in the room, she paused. "What's going on?" "Our girl here," Kelly said, throwing an arm around Susanna's shoulders, "has made it official. She's going all the way." Shonali's eyes widened. "Really? Oh my God, sus!" The shopping bags were unceremoniously dumped as Shonali rushed to join the group hug. For a moment, the three friends stood there, a tangle of arms and laughter and happy tears. "Okay," Shonali said as they finally broke apart. "We need to celebrate. Properly." "What did you have in mind?" Susanna asked, wiping her eyes. A mischievous grin spread across Shonali's face. "Leave it to me." The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Shonali, ever the social butterfly, seemed to know everyone in Manchester. With a few quick phone calls, she'd arranged for a private room at a local restaurant, complete with a hastily arranged "Congratulations, Susanna" banner. As they got ready for the impromptu party, Susanna found herself standing in front of her full-length mirror, studying her reflection. She'd come so far from the scared, conflicted person she'd been just a year ago, but there was still a long road ahead. "You okay in there?" Kelly's voice called from the other side of the door. "Yeah," Susanna replied, smoothing down her dress. "Just thinking." Kelly poked her head in. "Good thoughts or scary thoughts?" "Both," Susanna admitted. "It's exciting, but it's a lot, you know." Kelly nodded, moving to stand beside her friend. "I can't even imagine." "But you've got this, sus, and you've got us." Susanna leaned her head on Kelly's shoulder, grateful beyond words for her friend's unwavering support. The party itself was a joyous affair. Shonali had managed to gather a small group of their closest friends from university, all of whom greeted Susanna with hugs and words of encouragement. As they sat around the table, sharing stories and laughter, Susanna felt a warmth spreading through her chest. This was her family now, not replacing the one she'd lost, but a new one, built on understanding and acceptance. "A toast," Kelly announced, raising her glass, "to Susanna for being brave enough to be herself and for letting us be part of her journey." "To Susanna," the group echoed, glasses clinking. Susanna felt her cheeks flush with a mix of embarrassment and pride. "Thank you all," she said softly. "I couldn't have done this without you." As the night wore on, Susanna found herself in a quiet corner with Shonali, watching as their friends danced to the restaurant's background music. "You know," Shonali said, nudging Susanna with her shoulder, "I've been thinking about what you said, about your family." Susanna turned to her, curious. "What about it?" "Well," Shonali continued, "I was wondering if you'd thought about making a memory book or something. You know, with photos and stories about them, something you can keep with you as you move forward." Susanna blinked, surprised by the suggestion. I hadn't thought of that, but I like it." Shonali smiled. "We could help if you want. Kelly's good with that scrapbooking stuff." "Yeah?" Susanna nodded, feeling a lump form in her throat. "Yeah, I'd like that." As they rejoined the party, Susanna felt a sense of completeness she hadn't experienced before. She was moving forward, becoming who she was meant to be, but she wasn't leaving her past behind. Instead, she was finding a way to carry it with her, to honor it while embracing her future. The night ended with more hugs, more tears, happy ones, and promises to stay in touch as Susanna embarked on the next phase of her journey. As they walked home under the starlit sky, Susanna felt a sense of peace settle over her. "You know," she said, linking arms with Kelly and Shonali, "I think everything's going to be okay." Her friends squeezed her arms in response, and together they walked towards home, towards the future. The weeks that followed were a wind of appointments, paperwork, and preparations. Susanna threw herself into the process with a determination that surprised even her closest friends. Each step, from finalizing her legal name change to scheduling her first surgery, felt like a milestone on a journey she'd been unknowingly preparing for her entire life. "You're practically glowing these days," Kelly remarked one evening as they sat sprawled across the living room floor, surrounded by photos and craft supplies. The memory book project had quickly become a group effort, with Kelly's artistic flair turning it into a work of art. Susanna looked up from the photograph she'd been studying, a candid shot of her family at the beach years ago. Am I? I guess I just feel right, like everything's finally falling into place. Shonali, stretched out on the couch with her laptop, peered over the screen. "Even with all the needles and doctor visits?" "Even with those," Susanna chuckled, "though I could do without the constant blood tests." As she carefully pasted the beach photo into the book, Susanna felt a familiar pang of sadness. "I just wish—" She trailed off, but her friends understood. Kelly reached out, squeezing her hand. "They're with you, Sus, every step of the way." Susanna nodded, blinking back tears. "I know, it's just, there are so many questions I wish I could ask them, so many things I want to tell them." "So tell them," Shonali suggested, sitting up. "Write it down. Put it in the book." The idea took root, and soon Susanna found herself penning letters to her family members, pouring out her heart onto the pages. It was cathartic, a way of processing her grief and her joy, her past and her future. As the date of her first surgery approached, Susanna's nerves began to fray. The night before, she found herself unable to sleep, pacing the flat in the early hours of the morning. "Cuppa." Susanna jumped at the sound of Kelly's voice. "Christ, you scared me. What are you doing up?" Kelly shrugged, already moving towards the kitchen. "Heard you wandering about. Figured you could use some company." They sat at the kitchen table, steaming mugs in hand, the quiet of the night wrapping around them like a blanket. "Having second thoughts?" Kelly asked gently. Susanna shook her head. "No, not really, just scared, I guess. It's a big step." "It is," Kelly agreed. "But you're ready for it, and we'll be right there with you." The surgery went smoothly, and as Susanna drifted out of anesthesia, she was greeted by the sight of Kelly and Shonali's smiling faces. "Welcome back, Sleeping Beauty," Shonali grinned. Susanna tried to speak, but her throat was dry and scratchy. Kelly quickly offered her some water. "How do you feel?" Kelly asked once Susanna had taken a few sips. Susanna considered the question. She was sore, groggy, and more than a little nauseous from the anesthesia, but underneath it all was a sense of rightness, of coming home to herself. Good, she managed to croak out. Really good. The recovery period was challenging, but Susanna faced it with determination and humor. Her friends rallied around her, taking turns staying at the flat to help out and keep her spirits up. One afternoon, about a week post-surgery, Susanna found herself alone for the first time in days. Kelly had a lecture she couldn't miss, and Shonali was at work. Slowly, carefully, Susanna made her way to the full-length mirror in her room. She stood there for a long moment, taking in her reflection. The changes were subtle, yet profound. She traced the line of her jaw, the curve of her cheek, seeing in them echoes of her mother's face. "I hope you can see me, Mum," she whispered. "I hope you understand." A knock at the door startled her out of her reverie. Thinking Kelly must have forgotten her keys, Susanna made her way to the entryway, calling out, "Coming!" She opened the door, a teasing remark on her lips, only to freeze in shock. Standing in the hallway, looking nervous and out of place, was her Aunt Margaret. "Hello, Susanna," Margaret said softly. "May I come in?" Susanna stood there, stunned into silence. Margaret was her mother's sister, the only family member she'd kept in sporadic contact with after her parents' death. But she hadn't told her about the transition, hadn't known how. How did you—" Susanna stammered. Margaret's eyes were kind, if a bit watery. "Your friend Kelly reached out to me. She thought you might need some family right now." Susanna made a mental note to alternately hug and throttle Kelly later. For now, she stepped back, gesturing for her aunt to enter. They sat in the living room, an awkward silence stretching between them. Finally, Margaret spoke. "I'm sorry I didn't reach out sooner. I didn't know what to say." Susanna nodded, her throat tight. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I was scared." Margaret reached out, taking Susanna's hand in hers. "Oh, love, you have nothing to be scared of, not with me." The dam broke, and Susanna found herself sobbing in her aunt's arms, years of pent-up emotions pouring out. Margaret held her, murmuring soothing words and rubbing her back like she used to when Susanna was a child. When the tears finally subsided, Susanna pulled back, wiping her eyes. "I'm sorry, I've made a mess of your blouse." Margaret waved off the apology. "It's just a blouse. This is much more important." She paused, studying Susanna's face. "You look so much like your mother." Susanna's breath caught. "Really?" Margaret nodded, her eyes shining. "She would be so proud of you, Susanna. So very proud." They spent the afternoon talking, Margaret catching Susanna up on family news and Susanna sharing stories of her journey. When Kelly and Shonali returned home, they found the two women poring over the memory book, laughing and crying in equal measure. As Margaret prepared to leave, she pulled Susanna into a tight hug. "You're not alone, love. Remember that. You've always got family, even if it's not quite the family you expected." Susanna nodded against her aunt's shoulder, feeling a piece of her heart slot back into place. That night, as she lay in bed, Susanna found herself reflecting on the unexpected turns her life had taken. The losses, the gains, the challenges and triumphs. She thought of her parents and sister, of Kelly and Shonali, of Aunt Margaret, of the family she'd lost and the family she'd found. With a smile, she reached for the journal on her nightstand and began to write. "Dear Mom, Dad, and Emma, today was a day I never expected. Aunt Margaret came to visit, and it felt like a piece of you was here with me. We talked about you, laughed about old memories, cried a bit too. I wish you could be here to see me now, to see how far I've come, how happy I am. But in a way, I feel like you are here. In the way Aunt Margaret squeezes my hand just like Mum used to, in the laugh lines around her eyes that remind me so much of Dad, in the way she teases me just like Emma always did. I'm building a new life, but I'm carrying you with me every step of the way. I hope you're proud of me. I'm trying to be the person you always believed I could be. I love you, always and forever. Your daughter, Susanna." She closed the journal, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new steps on her journey. But for now, in this moment, everything was exactly as it should be. Susanna closed her eyes, letting sleep claim her, surrounded by the love of her past and the promise of her future. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my other socials if you want more wonderful content, early access, behind the scenes, and more. All links down below.